Have you ever noticed that, the true test of leadership, it almost never happens when things are going well?
That's so true.
We tend to think of great leaders and we see, smooth operations, titles, success, but all the material we've been looking at this week says something completely different.
It really
It
does.
makes this powerful case that real leadership is forged when the unexpected hits, when you're staring down failure or opposition is challenging everything.
That's the core tension, isn't it?
Hmm.
We so often misunderstand leadership as just power or
Oh,
control.
right.
But the reality is so much more demanding. It's fundamentally about influence. It's about guiding people through all that uncertainty and chaos. And the one trait that really separates the leaders who just survive from those who, well, thrive in a crisis,
Yeah.
it's resilience.
Resilience, it's a word we hear all the time. But in today's world, with rapid change, all the volatility,
Hmm.
we found it's not just some desirable soft skill, it's absolutely essential.
Absolutely. So our mission in this deep dive is to explore resilience not as just grit or, stubbornness.
Right. Not just toughing it out.
Exactly. We're talking about an integrated capacity, the ability to adapt emotionally, spiritually, and strategically when you're under intense pressure. This is meant to be a blueprint for turning those setbacks into real growth.
And this isn't just, abstract theory, right?
Not at all.
These concepts are grounded in these incredible historical examples. Think about Joseph. First, he's cast into a pit by his own brothers,
Unbelievable.
then sold into slavery, then thrown into prison for something he didn't even do. And yet he transforms this sequence of just brutal adversity into a path to becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt.
Or the Apostle Paul. He's constantly navigating imprisonment, physical dangers, strife within the communities he's leading.
All while trying to build something new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And his challenges, the shipwrecks, the beatings, the opposition, they become the very pivot points that actually amplify his impact.
Yeah.
These figures give us a tangible model for leadership when the ground is just perpetually shaking.
Okay, so let's unpack this because the urgency it's pretty high, right? The evidence suggests that if you ignore this need for deep resilience, you end up with eroded trust, fractured teams.
Stalled growth. It has real costs. When your plans completely unravel, that moment, that's the crucible. That's where real leadership is forged.
So where do we start?
Well, this is where we need to anchor the concept in something deeper than just management theory. From this perspective, resilience isn't just psychological endurance. It's a spiritual imperative.
A spiritual imperative. What do you mean by that?
The stability you need to lead has to start internally, in the core of the leader. It's why Proverbs tells us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
So that completely shifts the definition. It's not about how tough you are. It's about what sustains you when that toughness, inevitably runs out.
Precisely. Conventional resilience is all self-reliant, right? Your grit, your effort. But this integrated resilience is a blend of emotional fortitude, spiritual grounding, and strategic adaptability. And it's all rooted in this trust that there's a larger plan at work.
What's fascinating is that the sources root this in something a lot of modern leaders might find challenging. The idea of God's sovereignty. For leaders who are focused on metrics and control, how does believing in something external translate into action during a crisis?
Well, that's the key. Belief in sovereignty gives you perspective, not passivity. It's an anchor. It stops discouragement from becoming completely debilitating. If you believe the ultimate outcome is in God's hands, you're freed from that paralyzing fear of failure.
So you're not constantly panicking about short-term losses.
Exactly. We see this so powerfully in William Wilberforce, his campaign to abolish the slave trade. It went on for decades. He was met with defeat after defeat in Parliament.
Intense opposition.
Intense. But his perseverance wasn't based on polling data. It was grounded in prayer, a clear moral vision, and this deep trust in divine justice. That's what allowed him to keep going for 40 years.
So connecting that to the bigger picture, it means resilience has to be cultivated holistically, which brings us to this framework, the analysis details, the 3 dimensions of adaptation.
Yes, emotional, spiritual, and strategic. And they all work in synergy. If you're weak in one area, say you're emotionally unstable, it's going to undermine everything else.
Okay, let's start with dimension 1, emotional adaptation, or steadfastness. What does that actually look like when the team is panicking and the news is just bad?
It's the ability to manage your own stress, to regulate those primal responses, fight, flight, or freeze, and just maintain composure. And this is so critical because a leader is an emotional mirror for their team.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Your composure sets the tone for the entire organization. If you panic, that panic ripples outward and undermines confidence almost instantly.
So your internal state becomes the team's external reality. The classic illustration here is David in exile, right? Being hunted by a king who wants him dead.
Exactly. David's facing constant pressure, the threat of betrayal. Yet he models this profound emotional stability. The best example is in the cave, when he has the chance to kill Saul and he doesn't.
He shows restraint.
And that wasn't just a moral choice, it was strategic. He was communicating to his followers that he was governed by principle, not by reactive fear or revenge.
But I wonder, in a modern business context, if a rival is actively trying to sink your company, is restraint always the right move? Couldn't the team see it as weakness?
That's a really important distinction. We're talking about emotional restraint, not strategic inaction.
Okay.
David was still leading, still mobilizing, still protecting his people.
Mm-hmm.
Emotional steadfastness just means you control your internal response so that your external action, which might be very decisive, comes from a place of clarity, not panic.
So the practical application for you, the listener, is to cultivate those daily self-regulation practices, prayer, reflection, and modeling calm decision-making.
Your team will take its cue from you.
All right, so if emotional steadfastness is the rudder, what's the bedrock? That brings us to dimension 2, spiritual adaptation, being anchored in faith.
This is the non-negotiable core. Spiritual resilience grounds your decisions in a trust in God's sovereignty. Faith gives you a perspective that goes way beyond the immediate hardship.
Beyond the quarterly report or the latest political skirmish.
Exactly. It ensures your decisions are guided by principles, not just temporary emotions or market trends.
And this is where that habit of devotion becomes so critical. The example here is Daniel in the lion's den.
Right, and Daniel's resilience in that crisis didn't just appear out of nowhere. It came from his consistent, established spiritual habits. He prayed 3 times a day, even when it was made illegal.
His resilience was a byproduct of his daily integrity.
It was. He maintained his perspective even facing death, because he already accepted the outcome was in God's hands.
But for a leader today, how do you translate that? It can't just be about a personal quiet time. How do you integrate faith into, say, a board meeting?
It means you move beyond just reacting after a crisis hits. It means you actually integrate scripture and prayer into the decision-making process. You seek discernment before the critical meeting. You define your goals based on enduring principles, not just short-term gains.
It creates a kind of moral compass that still works when everything else is spinning.
Exactly. Which leads us right into dimension 3, strategic adaptation, learning and innovating. This is what makes resilience proactive.
Not just about weathering the storm.
Right. Strategic resilience is about making clear decisions under high uncertainty. It's about learning fast from your challenges and adjusting your tactics, while staying completely faithful to your long-term goals. And to be clear, this is not just reactive improvisation.
Not just winging it.
Definitely not. The case study for this is Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. I mean, that's a master class in this.
He shows up to total ruin, right?
Total ruin. And his response is so methodical. First, he assesses the situation, riding out at night to see the damage for himself. Second, he mobilizes the community with a shared vision. And third, and this is the most crucial part, he has the people work with a tool in one hand.
And a sword in the other. That balance of building and defending is such a powerful metaphor.
It applies directly to how you manage resources under threat. It means you identify your weaknesses, you make clear plans, and you know when to pivot on tactics without ever compromising the mission. This is where we see that sequence. Challenge leads to response, which leads to learning, and that fuels growth.
Okay, now let's tackle the things that can stop you in your tracks. Failure and opposition. For so many leaders, these are just paralyzing. But the sources we looked at, they radically reframe this.
They do. In what you might call God's economy, failure isn't the end. It's actually a necessary instrument of refinement.
Resilient leaders don't just fear failure, they engage it.
They analyze it. They accept it as a teacher. This is an ancient idea. Proverbs says, though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again.
The falling isn't the real problem.
The failure to rise is.
That is a hard lesson, though. When you're in the middle of a major setback, a failed launch or something, it's really hard to see it as refinement. How do you build that muscle memory for reframing it positively?
We can look at figures like the Apostle Paul again. He saw all his setbacks, shipwrecks, imprisonments, not as signs of defeat, but as opportunities to see God's power at work. He said he was hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. His setbacks were evidence of his formation.
And we also have that incredible modern example of Joni Eareckson Tada.
Her story is so powerful. She never denied the tragedy of her paralyzing accident, but she reframed that profound adversity into a conduit for this amazing global purpose. Framework here is really practical. You have to redefine failure as feedback, not defeat.
And you mentioned something called a failure audit. What does that look like for a leader?
A failure audit is basically a structured, brutally honest debrief. It can be a journal entry or a formal team meeting. But you have to ask, what assumptions were wrong here? What part of this did we control? What was external? And most importantly, what is the one specific actionable lesson we can pull from this to fuel the next attempt?
You're extracting the tuition you paid for that failure.
Exactly.
And what about opposition? Every leader has critics.
It's guaranteed. As the sources remind us, in this world you will have trouble. Opposition isn't an obstacle to be avoided, it's a catalyst. It forces growth. Look at Esther. She navigated lethal political opposition, not with force, but with wisdom, courage, and a reliance on divine timing.
So the strategy isn't to just fight fire with fire.
Not at first. The approach is to identify the sources of opposition without giving in to fear or resentment. Strategy is everything. Opposition, when you look at it this way, becomes diagnostic. It refines you. It forces you to have integrity and a clear message, which preserves your long-term credibility.
Okay, let's pull back for the long view. We talk about resilience as an individual trait, but how do we build resilient teams, resilient legacies?
Because resilience has to be contagious. It has to become institutional. The early church communities, they didn't survive persecution just because of a few individual heroes.
Right, it was communal.
They thrived through a shared vision, mutual accountability, and a collective faith that could absorb external shocks. A leader's influence multiplies when it's rooted in a shared purpose.
So what are the actionable principles for building that in your own organization?
You need structural transparency. Promote open, honest communication about challenges. Model resilience with your own consistent, non-anxious behavior. And crucially, you have to embed those spiritual principles, trust, service, long-term perspective, right into the culture itself.
So the team can absorb shocks much more effectively than any one heroic leader could.
Far more effectively.
And if leadership is a marathon, not a sprint, as Hebrews tells us to run with endurance the race set before us, what's the ultimate measure of a resilient legacy?
It's not authority. It's not the size of your organization. It's service. The sources are so clear on this. True leadership is ultimately measured by service, just as Christ defined it when he washed his disciples' feet.
Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant.
That's it. Service fortifies your character, it cultivates influence that lasts, and it ensures your legacy is about the impact you have on others.
I love that. So service actually becomes the resilient strategy itself.
It does. And to make this actionable for you right now, we'd encourage you to develop a personal resilience roadmap. Set some goals for the next 1, 5, 10 years, and make sure your daily habits, your emotional and spiritual disciplines, are explicitly aligned with those long-term goals.
That really brings us back full circle. Resilience is the invisible infrastructure of leadership. It's what lets you stand firm, make wise decisions under pressure, and inspire the kind of trust that lasts.
Triumph through adversity is holistic.
Yeah.
It really demands that integration of emotional steadiness, spiritual depth, and strategic flexibility. That's what ensures leadership is enduring and empowering.
So before we close this deep dive, here's a provocative thought for your week. Take a moment right now and identify one specific challenge. A conflict, a financial setback, a difficult relationship, something that just feels overwhelming.
And if trials really are instruments of divine formation, ask yourself this: how might this specific challenge be the most necessary pathway right now to unlocking your greatest influence and capacity for service?
Now commit to applying that challenge response learning e-growth framework to that one obstacle this week. Don't wait for the crisis to pass. Use it. Transform that potential defeat into an actionable platform for your leadership refinement.